Hey there, Careblazers. Welcome back to the place where we talk about everything dementia. Dr. Natalie here, and in today's video, I'm going to talk about things that you should consider before traveling with your loved one who has dementia. We're in the middle of summer vacations are happening, and whether you're traveling just across town or across country, there are some things that should be considered before you take that trek. Traveling with somebody with dementia certainly requires patience, planning, and the right mindset to help make everything go as smoothly as possible. So if you're thinking about traveling with your loved one with dementia this summer or at any point in the future, this video is for you. I'm going to share 4 things to consider before headed out to travel with your loved one with dementia. We're going to go over the right mindset, or getting your mind right, which is so important on so many levels. We're going to talk about how you could get an idea of how your loved one would do while they're traveling. I'm going to share the best type of travel / way to travel with your loved one with dementia. And then the 4th thing will actually be a handout if you're interested on some of my favorite packing tips and strategies to consider when you're traveling with somebody with dementia. All right, so tip number 1, get your mind right. One of the first things to consider when you're thinking about traveling with your loved one with dementia is your expectations and making sure they're realistic. Sometimes we get ideas in our mind that sound wonderful. You want to travel with your loved one. You want to build a closer relationship and a bond. You want to give them as many good experiences as possible before they pass away. It's all coming from a good place. However, it's also likely that the travel is going to be a bit frustrating, that there are going to be times during the travel when your loved one might not be feeling so well or might be struggling a bit. And it's important that the visions you have of all these wonderful things happening, which is entirely possible and it can be one of the greatest things you've done with your loved one, we also have to realize that it could also be pretty challenging and difficult. Now, I'm not saying traveling with your loved one is bad. In fact, it could be good on so many levels. I'm just saying be realistic in your expectations of how travel can be with your loved one who has dementia. Also, you're looking at travel through your eyes and what you think might be helpful and fun and enjoyable. But we always want to be thinking about how this could look through your loved one's eyes. So if you're thinking about a fun, relaxing, peaceful beach with the sun beating down on you and waves crashing and people around, sounds wonderful. But to your loved one with dementia, it could be a scary place with a bunch of strangers wearing hardly any clothes than they're used to wearing, feeling a little bit more hot than usual, and feeling a bit scared and intimidated by the big blue ocean that looks like it could swallow them up and take them away. So just always keeping in mind your perspective and also possible your loved one's perspective. So before packing up and going on a trip with your loved one, just take some time and think about if you're mentally prepared to take this trip, knowing that it could be stressful, there can be things that go wrong, and just know that you can handle it. Just taking a couple of minutes before you go on a trip, realizing that whatever might not go according to plan is going to be okay and that you guys will get through it, that can go far. But if you don't take the time to think about those possibilities, you can find yourself pretty frustrated in the moment. And just also keep in mind that maybe your entire agenda doesn't happen. Maybe your loved one isn't quite feeling up to seeing the major attractions one day, or they need a little bit more rest. That's okay. Just focus on the adventure, spending the time with your loved one and getting away and sharing a new experience, and don't get so hung up on all the little things that you really want to happen that aren't happening. After getting realistic and understanding that, the travel might come with its share of stressors and that you just need to be prepared for those to occur, the second tip is finding out whether or not your loved one is actually going to be able to handle the travel. So it's really hard to know for sure before you actually take the travel, but there are a couple of things you can do to get an idea of how your loved one may respond if you try to take them on a trip. One way to get an idea about how your loved one might do when they're traveling is to take some short trips from your home. These can be short day trips, half-day trips. But ask yourself, how does your loved one do when you take them out to a restaurant? How do they do when you take them to a friend's house, when you take them for a drive? These are some pretty good indications of how they might act when you actually go on a trip with them. You could start to increase the time that you're out of the house by doing some overnight stays, either at a nearby hotel, or if you have a family member or close friend, you can even practice trying to stay the night at their house just to see how your loved one responds. You also want to ask yourself, how does your loved one do just on a day-to-day basis, even within the home? If your loved one has a lot of paranoia or behavioral outbursts or significant confusion, that's really hard for you to control when you're at home or you're in their home. That might be an indication that they're going to struggle traveling too, because those behaviors aren't going to go away. In fact, whenever we take somebody with dementia outside of their typical environment, it sometimes leads to more confusion. So just some things to think about when you're trying to decide whether or not traveling is even a good idea to do with your loved one who has dementia. So the third thing I have for you to consider is what type of travel is best for your loved one who has dementia. Whether you're traveling across town or across country, there's a bunch of different modes of transportation that you can take. And depending on your loved one's specific situation and behaviors, some may be better than others. So whether you're driving in a car, taking a bus, a train, a plane, let's take a look at how your loved one's behaviors are and try to figure out which one of these transportation options would be best. You also want to think about the specific symptoms your loved one experiences, and that might help you narrow down your choices for places to visit or places to travel to. For example, if your loved one wanders at home, chances are you don't want to consider a place to travel where it's really crowded, large, bunch of people around, and a super unfamiliar place. This raises the risk of your loved one wandering and getting lost in a place where nobody knows who they are, and it would be difficult to find them. Traveling in itself raises the risk of wandering. So if your loved one already has a tendency to wander, you might want to consider doing a more low-key travel, either to a place, a relative's home, or a more secluded or less crowded place. If you have a loved one who's frequently agitated or restless, and they have a hard time sitting still in their own home, you might want to consider that when you're thinking about what type of travel to book. So if you're booking a plane ride that's several hours long and your loved one already has difficulty with restlessness at home, that might not be such a good idea, because plane rides have requirements for when you have to stay seated, when you have to keep your seatbelt buckled, where you can stand, walking up and down the aisles. So that's going to lead to more frustration on your part, whereas considering maybe traveling somewhere within driving distance, you have the flexibility of being able to pull over when you need to pull over and take as many breaks as you need. If for whatever reason you must fly wherever you're going to travel and you have to take your loved one with dementia, you want to consider taking flights during like the red-eye flights or less popular times to try to help reduce some of the agitation they might have and help increase the chances that the plane staff will be more understanding and helpful for your situation. You also want to consider things like the state of your loved one's health. People with dementia usually have more than just dementia going on with their health. So if your loved one has a lot of medical problems that have required a lot of medical visits, even unexpected frequent medical visits, that might be an indication that you want to travel somewhere close by, so that if they needed to get to their medical providers or to a hospital of some sort, you're near a reputable hospital or you're near their providers. Other things to consider when you're thinking about how to get to a travel destination or where that travel destination should even be are things like their medication. So if your loved one's on insulin, is the place that you're traveling to going to have proper refrigeration or air conditioning in order to keep that insulin at the proper temperature? You want to consider things like their mobility. Do they use a wheelchair or a walker, and are you traveling somewhere that is easily handicap accessible? So I hope this just gets your gears turning in terms of when it comes to travel, some places and some ways of traveling might be better than others, and it all depends on your loved one's symptoms and kind of functioning and medical conditions. When and if you do decide to travel with your loved one with dementia, you want to take into mind certain tips and packing suggestions to help make things go as smoothly as possible. For example, always carrying around with you an extra pair of change clothes with wet wipes, making sure you always have extra days of their medications on hand just in case there are any delays in getting back home. So I have put together a handout with a bunch of my different tips to consider prior to going on vacation with your loved one who has dementia. And if you'd like that, I'll place a link in the description below. All right, Careblazers, that's all I have for today. Let me know what vacations you've taken with your loved one who has dementia, or what trips you're thinking about taking with your loved one who has dementia. I hope that everybody's summer plans and vacations go safely and smoothly, and I will see you all next week. Take care, Careblazers.